Today I want to talk about the effects of entertainment media. I always see entertainment media as what they are, pure entertainment that gives joy to you and others. Some might disagree with my viewpoint and say that media can be more than just entertainment, which I don't disagree too much, but a lot of people, when they're talking about media such as video games or movies or comic books or anime, they tend to forget the core parts of what made them to be what they are. They can be more, absolutely, but you need to always remember the core. They're still entertainment that were meant to be consumed by everyone, and by trying to divert from those expectations by making the material to be unconventional will ultimately result in a product that forgets its core values as an entertainment medium and becomes something that not a lot of people enjoy. Why am I talking about this? Well, since my perspective that video games are entertainment first has held my mind for so long ever since I was a kid, whatever sorts of messages that video games taught me, like running over cops would kill them and give you guns, it doesn't impact me at all even when I played those games as a kid. I recognize that games are fiction and we can't do those things in real life because I'm not dumb and my parents taught me well. However, some people say that video games can be more. Video games can have deep, meaningful stories with underlying messages, engaging themes, riveting lores and theories. Well, there's a huge difference between saying video games can have meaningful messages and video games can have meaningful messages that will influence and shape your core values as a human being. I agree with the former, but strongly disagree with the latter. If you're still doubtful about the effects that underlying messages in video games can achieve, let me ask you a question. Has there ever been a game that contains some form of a moral message or an underlying message which shapes the moral or ethical values that you have to this day? Is the message "kill the cops," which existed in many video games, has influenced you to the point where you would do such a thing in real life? Is the implication that you can get tons and tons of items by destroying vases worked so much to the point where you would do such a thing in real life? So in my opinion, when anybody said video games can convey meaningful messages, I would definitely agree. But when they say video games can convey meaningful messages that can shape our core values, they're basically implying that violent video games will make you a murderer. Sure, video games have the capacity of conveying great moral messages, symbolisms that are up to discussions, theories that explain and expand the lore of those games. But can all of those underlying messages shape you as a person in a significant manner? I don't think so. For the record, I've played 70 hours plus of Tekken 7 and I've yet to feel any sort of desire on punching people in the face or juggle them in the air. I've played tons of hours in Skyrim reading the lore, storylines, and the underlying messages, but none of those really shaped me as a human being or something. I see those stories and underlying messages as more of a supply to the entertainment to make them better and more enjoyable. Video games at its most basic core is still entertainment, it's still fiction, and most of us are able to distinguish between fiction and real life. So it sounds like I'm replying into a decades-old argument that has been perpetuated by many, and that's because there's a rather interesting news of an assistant professor's PhD being revoked thanks to her study. The study is called Boom Headshot, Effect of Video Gameplay and Controller Type on Firing Aim and Accuracy. The premise is that if you play video games with peripherals that simulate the gun, for example the Wiimote or the GunCon, you're gonna be able to shoot people accurately. Sounds like a really nice study to start off with. Maybe we're able to improve the military's accuracy by not having people to shoot guns in real life, and just have a kid who is good at Time Crisis to teach you how to do it. To my shocking horror, the study's methodology is pretty flawed. The players are given 3 games, the gun range that we play, Resident Evil 4, and Super Mario Galaxy of all games. Of course, the players are given either the gun Wiimote or the original Wiimote, and from the study, it turns out that after having the players to shoot with an airsoft gun in a gun range, the players who play with the GunCon manage to shoot more accurately than those who use standard controllers. Sounds like a respectable high-quality paper, but that's just the surface. For some reason, during the airsoft trials, the players are taught in how to use the airsoft gun, which kinda defeats the entire freaking study, doesn't it? But we're not talking about how to use airsoft guns, we're talking about accuracy. And since the vibrations in gun cons have the exact same effect as the recoils of a real gun, definitely PhD materials. The story was done in 2014, but a year later, someone decided to be more skeptical with the study. Skeptical with a PhD certified study like this? Pfft, what? Is it because it's a load of BS and the original data isn't available? Anyway, the point of me covering that particular part of the news is because I want to highlight to you guys that the actions that we do in video games, whether it be punching people or murdering people or stealing cars, they do not reflect to the actions that we do in real life. If the actions that we do in the game will not have a reflection to our actions in real life, then how do you think that underlying messages could? Do you think that when the game constantly tells you to kill the cops, for example, you would also do the same thing in real life? People would not fall into these messages unless they're mentally ill psychopaths. But hey, this isn't the first time when gamers are being demonized for being mentally ill psychopaths. That happens pretty much every day. So now we get to see someone at Gamescom highlighting this for you in a different perspective. However, before we get into those different perspectives, we're gonna need to take in a lot of context, so bear with me here.
I think basically games are just about distraction, really, to be brutal about it at the moment. Games are about filling our lives. And I think this is one of the few times where the distinction of casual and hardcore is not bad. Mostly it's just rubbish and should just be put in a box.
Thankfully, our presenter here, Matt Lees, highlighted the definitions not by casuals or hardcore, but by the two tiers of distraction, which consist of grout or cement. Grout basically refers to people who are just using video games as a temporary distraction or something to fill in the gap. Cement is a lot more hardcore than that. It's basically people who are demanding an infinite uncertain amount of time when playing video games. You see how these two playstyles connect into our discussions of video game influence? Well, we'll get to that.
I think when you look at games that like fill a bigger gap for people, this is where sometimes we see traditionally a lot more problems. There's increased demands on the medium in terms of like what people want from them. And for a long time, the ultimate idea of a video game, and that's part of what you're selling. You're not just selling a product, you're selling an idea. Is an idea of a game you can play infinitely, the ultimate game that you can just play forever and it will always be fun. And when games seem to promise this and then fail to achieve that, that's when the biggest backlash comes. You know, No Man's Sky was a game which like lots of people, for lots of reasons, got very heavy expectations about it. And people were so angry when it didn't meet this ultimate impossible goal.
Yeah, no kidding. No Man's Sky promised the impossible, failed to deliver the impossible, and disappointed pretty much everybody. I do have a problem with your slide though, it's a little bit misleading. In No Man's Sky's case, it's not the gamers who demand an infinite distraction, it's the developers who promised it.
And I think it's really telling here though, with when cement doesn't fill the gap that people think it will, the anger tends to stem from consumer rights and about treating games as a product.
Again, the slide is a little misleading. Why does consumer right be put in quotations? No Man's Sky is a notoriously disappointing game in which the game developers are just lying to people's faces about the features that they have. The consumers are promised something that the game devs did not deliver. You twisted this as if it's actually the consumers who wanted an infinite distraction. Well, not really, they just want the game to keep its promises.
They talk about it as a product of entertainment, but I think actually it is big games like this are consumable products. They're just not that. They serve quite a specific role. And I think the games are a product. They are basically medication for the soul. And it's self-medication though, which is interesting.
Well, that's exactly the point of entertainment media. They're supposed to be a stress reliever. That is at least in the consumer side. In the producer side, entertainment media can be your livelihood. Hell, even as a consumer, you're able to transform these entertainment media to be your own livelihood. Kind of like me in some ways.
But, and this is the crucial thing, but if you are immersed in something over a really long time and it's an all-consuming monoculture and it's only giving you certain messages and it's only giving you certain ideas, that has very real and rarely positive consequences. So it's okay for a while, but the longer you're doing it, the more likely you're going to start having some issues.
And here we go.
So, onto, this is what I mean, the roller coaster. Talked about games a bit. Now I'm going to talk very briefly about what happened in 2014. I was invited here today because I wrote a big thing about GamerGate and the connections between that and the alt-right and the kind of fascist movements in the US and beyond. Effectively, I'm not going to go into any detail on this because the people who are victims of this deserve to be able to live their lives and have successes without being defined as victims all the time. The people who were the aggressors and the abusers, they just want attention, so screw it.
Matt, hate to break it to you, but Zoe Quinn puts herself as the victim all the time. Have you read the draft of her upcoming book that allegedly one of her unpaid editors decided to leak it to the public? That's a whole lot of dumpster fire.
The wide thing that's important about this is it started off with a man harassing a woman on the internet. There were claims of impropriety. They were just unbelievably debunked very quickly. We're talking like 2-3 days, like, nah, this is false, boom, boom, boom. But then it carried on. We had lots of far-right people, lots of opportunists just looking to get more influence. And it was kind of dismissed internally and externally. And then, oh no, about a year later, we suddenly sort of, all this madness that didn't seem to make any sense started appearing in the wider world on a more prominent level.
So Matt Lees is talking about GamerGate. If you don't know, GamerGate is a movement to fight for the journalistic ethics in video game journalism. If you haven't been caught up yet, video game journalists have been incredibly corrupt. It's been very well documented. Go read DeepFreeze if you want to know these improprieties in depth. As for GamerGate being debunked, here's how they debunked that in a nutshell. So, not really debunked. They just say that it is. I won't talk too much about this because God knows how many times I say this, but thankfully we don't have to go too much. Let's continue.
However, a really important caveat that I have to make, because every time I talk about this stuff, people go, "Brrr." It didn't, like, GamerGate didn't cause the alt-right. It didn't cause fascism in America, all right? Like, America has had some really kind of horrible tendencies in that regard for a long time, and it was very much just one of the bigger tips of the iceberg in culture of being like, we've got a big problem bubbling away here, and it was just one of the first points where we saw it.
Okay, so what did cause the increase of alt-right or fascist groups in America?
Having said that, there really were some very strong connections, as I wrote in the article, and you can give it a read if you want, but you know, there's...
Wow, just look at that slide. So GamerGate influenced Breitbart, or Breitbart influenced GamerGate, whatever, which influenced the alt-right, which ultimately influenced the White House. I gotta say, as someone who is only in it for the journalistic improprieties in gaming, that's one hell of an influence that I make.
So we had this movement that was internally within the games industry, sidelined. We've got a horrible tendency in the games industry that whenever anyone calls out for respect or things to be better, it's treated as being drama, like it's a playground, and that's really disappointing. And externally outside of games, it was just ignored because basically it just confirmed what everyone always thought about video games anyway. You know, it's just a bunch of toxic losers who live in their basement. Like, of course they're being assholes, whatever, like...
Dude, if you want gamers to treat you guys with respect, maybe stop calling them basement-dwelling losers. Just saying.
So yeah, we had this aggressive, irrational movement that was fueled by anti-progressive ideals and open bigotry. Like, it must be video games, right? It must be caused by video games, because what else could it possibly be? But oh no, it's fascism.
Rock.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
Wrong.
proved over and over again.
Wrong.
We actually had...
So, I mean, one of the things I spent a long time thinking about GamerGate because it didn't make sense to me. It was so irrational. I'd never witnessed anything like it. I spent a long time trying to unravel it until I started reading about fascism. And I should have read about it earlier. I should have been taught about it earlier. But, you know, a lot of countries haven't been. Germany is good at that. It's awesome. But I wasn't. And it wasn't until I read about, you know, Eco Umberto's 14 most common features of laying the groundwork for fascism that it was like, oh my, this is why it doesn't make sense, because irrationality is at the heart of it.
So in order to comprehend GamerGate, you have to read about fascism and Nazi Germany. I don't understand a lot about fascism or Nazi Germany, but I can still comprehend GamerGate. What are you doing?
Anyway, all this stuff is kind of irrelevant. I'm just going through it as a backstory so we get an idea of what's wrong and what we need to look at.
Well, not for this video. You basically implied that gamers are assholes because of fascism, but for some reason you decided to connect that to people's playtime. I don't get you, mate.
The key thing for me is that games culture proved to be a really soft target for far-right recruitment. I think that is the key thing, and we need to look at why that is and look to change that.
Praise Keck?
Because we didn't start the fire.
Yes, you did. You're just denying reality at this point. Jesus Christ.
Just because games weren't responsible for the anti-progressive movements we've seen across the world, it doesn't mean that we aren't culturally complicit. You know, this happened in our house, and that has been what has been most upsetting to people like me who've lived and worked in games for 10 years.
So, what you're saying here is just because we didn't do it doesn't mean we're not indirectly responsible. That's a very fascist mindset, if you ask me.
And to ignore it and to push it one side and go, yeah, but it wasn't me, it wasn't people like me, that's irresponsible. We need to take responsibility for what happened and try and stop it from happening again.
Okay, Matt, I am guilty as charged. What can I do to fix the gaming culture?
I kind of wonder about this, and I think, is the content of games today a problem? And I think violence, people talk about violence, I don't think that's a problem, but I think violence without context is an issue. And it's not so much the violence, it's more the aggression. If you're not giving people good reasons to be fighting stuff and killing stuff, then you can maybe very gently kind of change the norms that people have in their heads about what's right and what's wrong.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. After building all of those contexts, we're finally come into the part where he basically suggested that violent video games, if not being taken into context, might very gently change the perception and morality of those who play it. My God, man, that is just monstrous. That is one monstrous argument. All of the aggressions that are caused by people who are pissed at the unethical practices that game journalists made. Nope, it's the fault of the video games that fuel those aggressions and fascism that justifies it. And don't even get me started with the slides. Wow, the slides. Let's have Matt explain it to us first.
And then we've got this insistence that games aren't political. Like, Far Cry 5 is a game which is coming out soon, and it's about far-right religious fundamentalists in America, but the devs are still like, no, it's not, we're not making any political statement. It's like, well, why not? Like, why not?
Why not? Because it's a freaking video game, and people just want to have fun.
And I think this, combined with a trend in game design towards grey morality, is just a thing of amplifies a culture of false equivalence.
Okay. I'm gonna skip this because I need a real tangible solution. Let's just assume that I know what the problems are, I know what the root causes of them, so what's your solution on this?
So what do we do, though, to make things better? And this is where it gets a bit tricky, because I think this is a hard thing, especially for me. We need to radically accept what games are right now in the world, what they do.
And one of those examples is just accept that games aren't political. Just saying.
And this is difficult for me because I know that games can do so much. I know that games can teach us, they can challenge us personally, they can encourage personal growth. I'm somebody who grew up banging on in parties at 2 a.m. to strangers about Shadow of the Colossus, and but it makes you feel all these, so for me to accept that actually this is not currently what games are is hard, but we need to. We can aspire towards what games can be whilst also accepting the role they currently play in society. And this is crucial for making positive changes.
Okay, so video games can be used as some form of an educational tool of some sort. It can teach us values and shape us to be what we are. And here's ultimately the point that I brought up in the beginning. Games can teach certain moral values, but they can't shape our moral values. Just because a game at multiple locations suggested that killing cops is a good idea, doesn't mean that it's the sort of value that players would hold in real life. Nor does it mean that it's the sort of thing that would shape the player's moral values. Maybe we should check out the nearby protester have been playing too much GTA. I'm going to sum up the next couple of minutes because his presentation is just, it's astonishing. So what he's saying in the next couple of minutes is, games is where disenfranchised people live and find shelter. Games have aimed for disenfranchised young men as its target audience. Power fantasies will only encourage aggression, and appealing to these people will only ruin you. GamerGate is a movement of cynics and losers, and we should be more proactive, not reactive against these people. The general idea that Matt is suggesting here is that video games have always been a place for disenfranchised young men who have no place in society to take shelter in. The video games that they play provide power fantasies, which encourage these young disenfranchised men in society to become more and more aggressive. Therefore, that leads to angry mobs that get aggressive towards everybody, including game journalists and game developers. Therefore, fascism, therefore GamerGate, therefore alt-right, therefore you get the idea. I mean, just wow. Okay, I'm going to respond to just one point. You are clearly ignoring the many unethical practices that the game journalists and game developers have done. You frame the concerned individuals on the state of the gaming industry as disenfranchised young men, also that you don't have to address the actual issues of game developers not fulfilling their promises or game journalists being corrupt. You just insult gamers. What did you say about respect again? And all of those talks about disenfranchisement and not having a place in society, the next part is a total projection.
Other fantasies are available, Some of the trends that we see the next generation latching onto are really interesting. Things like Minecraft, collaboration, growth, people working together. Trust as well, this idea that you're going to let someone come and do something with you and trust they're not going to destroy all your stuff. Undertale, a game that was just came out of nowhere and kids loved it. And it was just about love and friendship. And it was really, really sweet. Dream Daddies, it's like dating dads. And, again, that was something that was heavily supported by internet celebrities who kind of made that a thing. It wasn't like it came out of nowhere just because people love gay dads. That would have been wonderful. It's not the whole truth.
Wow, Dream Daddy of all game. thank you for bringing Dream Daddy up, because that game is just the perfect example of why your points are projection. So if you guys missed it, Dream Daddy is about a game where you can date dads. Sounds innocent enough until you realize that when someone decided to make an innocuous gender-bend fan art, the fans of the game just rained hell upon the artist to the point where the developers had to speak out and the artist temporarily locked her account. More details in a separate video link below or the top right corner. This is a very strange and very rare occurrence that doesn't always happen in any other fandoms. Not the Call of Duty fandom, not the Fallout fandom, not even any of the fandoms of the white male protagonist that you showed in one of the slides. Even if I agree in what you say about gamers being populated by people who are disenfranchised and that gamers cause more and more aggression in their part, there are people who are even more disenfranchised than the actual gamers and even more unreasonably aggressive. I think you, Matt Lees, have managed to explain why fandoms of innocuous games or animated series become so monstrous to anybody who goes against their will. Say what you want about Dream Daddy or Steven Universe, these fictional materials are also appealing into the most disenfranchised in the society. Games are populated by straight white men, and it appeals to young disenfranchised men. Dream Daddy and Steven Universe are two fictional media about acceptance and tolerance that appeal into the other most disenfranchised individuals. We're talking Tumblrites who shout progressive values and identify with multiple genders who do not have a place in the society because they're intolerant, bigoted, and just different in general. And yes, like the gamers, at least according to you, they also become toxic when the things that they like got invaded by people who wants to ruin them. Except unlike the gamers, where you can find reasonable individuals who have legitimate grievances, you can't find them in the Tumblrites. They got pissed over a Rule 63 fan art for a reason that no rational human being can comprehend. Again, more details in the video link below. So what you're suggesting here is replace one cancer with another cancer. Replace one group of disenfranchised individuals who have no place in society with another group of disenfranchised individuals who have no place in society. And I gotta be honest, if I put myself in your position and try to comprehend the reasoning behind the fans of Dream Daddy getting mad at fan arts, I would also be saying that it's nonsensical and people are being too aggressive. I think in some ways I can relate to you. Now, I'm not saying that the solution is just to delete these media out of existence, because there are still people who enjoy those things. There are still people who enjoy Dream Daddy and Steven Universe. I wouldn't remove a fictional media just because some psychopaths enjoy it. No, I think a much better solution would be to involve a bunch of psychiatrists and bring these lunatics into an asylum.
This is the crucial thing. Like, for a long time, disenfranchised young men were the only disenfranchised audience. But you know, now there's a lot of disenfranchised people out there. Do a different fantasy. Do something positive.
Wow, you straight up admitted it. Brilliant. Absolutely freaking brilliant. So you're going to replace one aggressive fan base with another aggressive fan base. Sorry, but this isn't a solution at all. This is just you jerking off and wanting people to notice you. Or maybe the entire point of this presentation is how to co-opt the gaming industry, replace the gamer demographic with Tumblrites, and turn every game into a Tumblrite fantasy. In that case, how about no?
And you know what? I think a key thing here is that controversial is good. I think if you're doing something controversial in games right now, in mainstream games, any decision that is controversial just means different. Just means it's not exactly what's come before it. So if you're not doing something vaguely controversial, you're probably not doing anything interesting.
That's actually pretty funny, because EVA Unit 1 saw you tweet about the Last Night game developer who decided to make a game about when the feminists take over the world. Oh wow, what a controversial game. Then you decided to get pissy on it and called the developer a dickhead. Not a very good move, Matt. Not a very good move.
And you know what? The future does require radical thinking.
Except when it's the radical idea that game journalism should be more ethical. That's just way too radical.
And here's finally just some practical solutions, because I don't like airy-fairy kind of nonsensical presentations.
Oh, good, finally! Let's get to the bullet points, and I'm just gonna read it quick. Examine what behaviors your game encourages. For example, don't bring too much positivity and acceptance and tolerance in your game, because the world does not and will not tolerate everything that you do. Question the explicit and implicit messages in your game. For example, don't make a game about killing cops, because you'll have a lot of people who are anti-cops. Damn you, Grand Theft Auto! Think about how games encourage interactions with others. For example, make a game about tolerance and acceptance. And by tolerance and acceptance, we mean tolerating and accepting you, not other people, because screw them. That worked out well with insert entertainment media with cancerous fandom here. Imagine that your game wholly defines someone's viewpoint for the world. Yes, keep playing military shooters and one day you're going to join the caliphate. Think about the impact of the fantasies you're selling. Think about the animals that you might abuse if you play too much Pokemon. Consider who you empower through the nature of your marketing. Military shooters are only for basement-dwelling gamergators that are essentially Anders Breivik. Instead, I'm going to make a game about peace, love, and tolerance. It's going to appeal to Tumblrites who are going to get pissed and drive someone into suicide when they draw one of their favorite characters slightly fat. That worked out well. Every piece of media you release is a reflection of who and what you stand for. I wrote a fanfiction about vigilantes fighting a mob who has the police and the government in its pockets. Therefore, I am against police officers and government in general. Embrace complicity and responsibility. Build a cool future. Build a world of tolerance and acceptance, right? Because that would never ever backfire, right? Right? And of course, it ends with the quote by Leigh Alexander, "Gamers don't have to be your audience." Well, they don't have to be your audience, that's for sure. You can make video games about tolerance and acceptance that appeal to the weirdest, most mentally ill and disenfranchised Tumblrite in the room, a game that no gamers would definitely touch with a 10-foot pole. Go ahead, build your army of Tumblrites. And knowing that Tumblrites would go at people for the smallest of things, I want you all to just eat each other. Before we end this video, huge thanks to Luke Manic, Candy-chan, and Ergomatic for the pledges. You are fantastic. A lot of fan arts too. Huge thanks to Penrain2 Duo for the fan art. It looks damn cute. And also one sweaty and hot fan art by the awesome Shen. It looks pretty damn hot. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.